genau diese Political World und diese Beobachtung im Bereich der Politik hat euch in Dänemark beschäftigt?
Ja, das hat es. Und meine Muttersprache ist Dänisch. Hier. Aber Nils hat letztes Jahr am Creative Bureaucracy Festival gesagt, dass er und ich, wir haben deutsche Ohren, denn wir sind in Sonderburg aufgewachsen, ganz nah an der deutschen Grenze. Aber jetzt muss ich ja in Englisch umswitchen, denn das hier ist ein bisschen schwierig in Deutsch. So I hope you forgive me for switching into English, because my professional language is just not solid enough in English. Carolina, will you switch to the next slide, please?
Sure, and we're also going to record your little input here.
Yes, exactly. I'm the one who pressed record, and thank you for telling me that, Carolina. I pressed record just so that we can use it afterwards. And now I'm going to start from the top. So my name is Lene Krogh Jeppesen, and I'm from the Danish Center for Public Sector Innovation. And I'm not going to go into a long explanation of what that is, but I think it's important because you come from municipalities and regional level, I think, as well, and state level. So in Denmark, we have this national center that actually covers both municipal level and regional level and state level. So we basically have the mandate to work with public sector innovators in all parts of the public sector. And one of the things we've been working on this year is this publication, which is about the political leadership of public sector innovation. And wanted to set the spotlight on how politicians see their role in public sector innovation. And why is that important? Because one of the things that make public sector innovation different from private sector innovation is the role of the politicians. The public sector has a democratically elected leadership as well as an administrative leadership. And both when we as civil servants are doing our normal jobs, and also when we work with public sector innovation, we are delivering on political goals and visions and directions as well. And I think sometimes in the day-to-day running of making the machines work around all the way around the public sector, we tend to forget that. And these targets that we're running towards, when the results that we are being asked to deliver on, they do have a political framing as well. And this is what we're trying to do with Arena here, is to give the voices back to the politicians. How do they see their role in public sector innovation? And the data that we are publishing here is based on qualitative and quantitative materials. So we did 18 interviews, qualitative interviews, we did 3 workshops, and we sent a questionnaire out to 2,637 respondents. And that's all the politicians in Denmark at municipal and regional level, and 608 of those answered, and that's 23% of them. It's nearly 80 pages long, so I won't go into all the details of it. But I think some of the main insights are, for one thing, is that you have these special conditions for political leadership of public sector innovation that is different from political leadership in general, which is that public sector innovation is characterized by the fact that you don't have all the answers. Neither the answers as to what the process should be, or the solution is completely known in advance. And usually when we as citizens or as the media go to our politicians, we ask them, how do you want to fix this problem? What is your answer to this? So this is why, in terms of public sector innovation, it is in particularly a little bit difficult for the politicians. It's a different way of leading than they do in other parts of their political roles. So what we can also see is that some of the main things the politicians themselves tell us is that they need to set a clear direction and lead. They need to show the way forward. They also need to have broad political support. So the more risky the innovations are seen to be, the more change is expected to come from them, the more massive the changes, the more important it becomes to have the broad political support. And also that they can show the way forward, but by having a curious and experimental approach. One of the politicians at municipal level told us that we need to think a little differently about our role as politicians. Give more space to citizens and set employees free. This transformation takes time, but it's necessary. Will you switch to the next slide, Carolina? And why is this important when we're talking about the COVID crisis and learning from this crisis as well? is because at least in Denmark, we see this familiar debate resurface once in a while. Are the politicians given enough room to actually make decisions and practice their political leadership? Or are they sort of framed too harshly by the highly educated civil servants that kind of take over that room from them? I always tell, when I get new colleagues that maybe haven't worked in the civil service before, I always tell them to watch Yes Minister, which if you haven't watched, is an old British TV show by now, but it just has heaps of excellent examples of that battle between the civil servants and the politicians. And it's really, really well written. One politician described the relationship to us between the civil servants and the public sector innovators, or the politicians, sorry, that the politicians, they take on the value domain. That's the green figure on this scale. And that the civil servants, they take on the knowledge domain. So the politicians, they lead according to visions, values, how they perceive a new and better society. And the civil servants, they lead by their professional knowledge. And they have all the time in the world, or at least a full work week, to deliver this knowledge, whereas the politicians in Denmark at local level mainly do this as a part-time job. It's only the mayor that is a full-time politician in Denmark. So that can easily become some sort of not the right balance between the two. In our work, we've seen examples where the scales have tipped to either side. So either that the politicians run the game and maybe sometimes they don't get all the knowledge out of the civil servants that could have been useful, or they may be pushing the laws a little bit too much. And we've also seen examples where the politicians really feel they just get to put the stamp of approval on the innovation work that's happening, on the decisions that are being made, and everything in between those two extremes. One insight from our work is that the value domain, the politician's domain, it's not only important in the beginning of an innovation process, but also during the innovation process. We make lots of decisions during an innovation process about which road to choose, and they need to be involved in these roads as well. So why is this important when we talk about the COVID crisis? Because we saw, at least in Denmark, I think it's probably the same in your countries, so many examples of these two roles during the handling of the crisis. In Denmark, our prime minister, she announced compared to other countries, pretty mild lockdown on March 11th. And she did this in speaking to the entire nation. And she specifically said, I will be making mistakes now. We are moving into unknown territory. I will be making mistakes. Everybody will be making mistakes. Please forgive us. Be patient with us. And I unfortunately didn't do a quantitative analysis of what happened during COVID in terms of innovation in Denmark, but I did some qualitative interviews. And what we're seeing is that both the civil servants and the politicians, they saw this signal from our prime minister as sort of a freedom letter. Yeah, go do something, because we need to do something and we need to do something quickly. It's okay if you make errors. Of course, stop it quickly when you see you're going down the wrong road, but go out and experiment. We don't have time for in-depth analysis. We need action to happen. This is actually, weirdly enough, or counterintuitive to some people, a really good way of reducing risk. You need to reduce risk by testing quickly. This is sort of the infamous fail fast, but don't do like Facebook and break things that are really important to democracy and society at the same time. But this fail fast, this testing quickly, we saw that happening in pretty much the entire public sector and the entire private sector at the same time, especially during the spring when the first wave hit us all at once. So this ability to take action really quickly is really important. We've also in Denmark seen lots of press conferences that joined the voices of the politicians and the civil servants. We need both those voices also in a crisis like the COVID situation. We saw the politicians at national level, the Minister for Health, the Prime Minister, on the stage at the press conference together with the CEOs of the major health agencies, of the police, and so on. So you saw these voices of the civil servants and the politicians united in getting the citizens involved in doing the right thing during the COVID crisis. Afterwards, there's been a lot of discussion about this. Was this the right balance? Whose decision was it to close the borders to Germany and to Sweden. Was it actually the politicians' choice, or were they right when they said that they did this on the advice of the civil servants? So those debates are still going on. Another thing that we can see is that priorities became really, really clear. You needed to deal with the COVID crisis, and that's the one project you were running towards, fixing this. We saw a lot of quick actions, and this is really good because this is how we deal with the crisis. But it requires that we have a strong, solid foundation. The structures, the bureaucracy is actually a good thing as well, because we can centralize decision-making, which we needed to do during the COVID crisis. In some municipalities, it was basically the mayor and the CEO of the municipality that made the decisions initially. But we can do that because we have the solid deliberative processes that we normally use. So we have a foundation of trust as well. And I've seen a lot of innovation consultants who really love the strategic priorities. So maybe there's some lessons there, I think in Denmark at least, that maybe we need to prioritize a little bit more and not start running with 17 innovation projects at the same time. So I hope that's one takeaway. We saw a lot of digitization happening, and Denmark has a really high level of digitization to begin with. It was quite easy for most of the public sector in the office spaces to work from home. It was a matter of scaling the capacity, but it was pretty much there. However, at the same time, we're also seeing that we still need more digital skills. In the health sector, for example, once you start converting sort of maternity prep for expecting mothers and fathers to a webinar and not having a meeting with them, that's different digital skills than what these people normally have. So we still need some new digital competencies as well. Yeah, I think the final thing I want to say is that I think in Denmark, at least, we don't have there's not one lesson. There's not 3 lessons to be learned. There's not one collective unifying experience about what happened during the COVID crisis and what it means for public sector innovation, or for how we work in the public sector, or for what our society is going to look like. Because there are actually a lot of different voices, a lot of different stories. And we have this urge to, can we please wrap it up in a lovely little box, and then that's the story, we can move forward with that. So let's please not do that. And I think that's what's great about the session today, and how we designed our little experiment today, is that this is actually about making room and space for the different stories, the different perspectives, and united try to see what story we can sort of make out of today's session.